there, and it would be on that transfer drawing on the wood that he would then work with his wood engraving tools.
His tools still exist?
Oh yes, yes, yes. There's a box which I believe that Bewick gave to his son Robert, but we still have it. Yes.
So tell me about these ones here. What are they? What do they do, these various tools?
Well, depending on the sort of engraved mark that you want to make on the boxwood block, these give different results. For instance, this one gives a nice straight groove, and you can see the end of it's like a diamond shape. That's called a lozenge. And then these that are particularly good for doing curves and whatnot, that's called a spit sticker, a lovely old name. And here's one that's got a bigger end, that's called a bull sticker.
Sounds painful.
For fine lines, here's one called a shader, which can make lines just by drawing it through the block like that. But this is quite a special. This one here is called a multiple, and obviously you can't see it there because it's so finely done, but the end of that tool is rather like a fork. It has several tines on it, so that if you push it through the wood, you're engraving more than one groove at a time. This is particularly useful for textures such as engraving a skyscape or something like that, where you want lines to be parallel.
And this object that you've got the block resting on, what is this? It's made of leather, or?
Yeah, well, it's a bag. It's a leather bag, and this one is mine. It's filled with sand. That one, I think, is rather probably like the one that Bewick used, because I would imagine that's filled with lead shot, and it's much heavier. It's not so easily moved across the bench.
Beautiful.
And its function is that you can turn it and engrave from different sides without lifting this off and having to turn it round, but rather like a potter's wheel in a way.
Right. Well, show me just a bit about how you would use it now.
Yeah. You can probably see the little curl of wood coming off there, right? Curl of wood coming off, and it's possible also to do a curved line by turning the whole thing, get a nice curve.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right, well listen, if I could just leave you to get on for a moment or two, and I'll pop and have a word with Stuart about printing things. Stuart, what are you doing?
Hello there. I'm just preparing some ink, ready for printing in a few minutes. So we'll pick up some ink on the printer's ball, and that's gently applied to the wood block. And then just to do a proof, I'll take a piece of paper, place it on the wood block like so. To take a proof then, we'll pull down the tympan that holds everything in place. It's gently wheeled under the platen.
Is this the sort of press that he would have used?
Yeah, the process that we use is just how the printers would have done it 200 years ago. But this press dates back to about 1835.
Just after his death then?
Yeah.
But very similar?
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's gently remove it and see if we have a print. Yeah.
Ah, isn't that beautiful?
That print room is in the nice 19th century farmhouse here at Cherryburn, and I'm in its main room, along with part of Cherryburn's wonderful collection of Bewick's books. These are the works upon which his reputation was built when he was alive, including The History of Quadrupeds, which was published in 1790 when he was 37 years old, and even more important, his History of British Birds, which was published in 2 volumes in 1797 and 1804 after 6 or 7 years' work. These were the first truly accurate engravings of wildlife that anyone had ever seen, and they had a dramatic effect on all who saw them. Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre starts with the heroine reading Bewick's History of British Birds in the library at Gateshead Hall. And in 1838, William Howitt wrote, "I've heard those who love the country say that the opening of Bewick was a new era in their lives. And you can see why. These are fantastic pictures, and they played a huge part in spreading a love of wildlife and interest in the British in natural history. They were devised, of course, as a kind of identification manual, so first and foremost they had to be accurate drawings of real life. Occasionally he got them wrong, or at least he got them less right, When he couldn't work from his own observations, when it was a creature that he'd never seen and he'd had to rely on stuffed specimens, he sometimes made mistakes. But in the main, the engravings are tremendously accurate records of each bird or animal. But they were often more than that, because the backgrounds to the creatures themselves were quite realistic. Lonely little Jane Eyre, huddled over the book, talks about the rock standing up alone in a sea of billow and spray. But though they're marvellous, these plates in the birds and the quadrupeds, in my opinion, they're not the best things about Thomas Bewick. The best things are what he called his tailpieces, the vignettes at the end of each chapter, those tiny pictures of his native Tyne Valley, pictures which are so tiny and yet so vivid and so real that they seem almost impossible. The life that Thomas Bewick lived, like many lives, was full of sadness, but even more full of beauty. He loved his parents, but he mourned their loss. His wife, Isabella, died a couple of years before him, but he left a daughter, to whom he inscribed his autobiography, My Dear Jane, and a son, Robert, who carried on the family tradition by becoming a skillful engraver in his own right and an even more skillful performer on the Northumbrian pipes. In 1827, the year before he died, when he was an old man, he was visited by the great American bird painter, John James Audubon, who wrote this about him. My opinion of this remarkable man is that he was purely a son of nature, warm in his affections, of deep feeling, and possessed of a vigorous imagination. He became the first engraver on wood that England has produced. Look at his tailpieces, reader, and say if you ever saw so much life represented before. Scenes calculated to excite your imagination present themselves everywhere. Surely you will agree with me that in his peculiar path none has equalled him. And you can't say fairer than that. As far as Bewick was concerned, there was no place like Cherryburn. He escaped here whenever he could, walking along the River Tyne, back to the little farmstead and the beautiful landscape that had first inspired his art.